Welcoming you, Gooshbagz, to the Week 4 edition of the 2021 Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League podcast. I, as always, am your host, the commissioner of the Gooshbagz Fantasy Football League, Jason Peck. I am here. Man, it has been a fantastic weekend. I'm certain to enjoy football again because I am in the win column, boys. Team Owen Tree is turning its luck around, and I am coming for all of you. All of you. I'm going to take you all down. Man, it was a great week. Unfortunately, our special guest this week, Andrew Kortz, who I played last week, I think he just kind of tapped out of this podcast this week because he was just so frustrated and sad at his embarrassing loss to the fantastic team that is my team. But no, for real, he's having a great time down in the DR on his honeymoon with his wonderful wife, Megan. So congratulations, you two. I know your wedding was a while ago, but congrats on getting to your honeymoon, and I hope you enjoyed this week. He was hoping to have some clips. I think he recorded something, but he was having trouble sending the recording to me. The Wi-Fi down there is not fantastic, so I don't have any clips from him, but we'll catch him hopefully in a later week. We'll get him on the podcast. No worries, you guys. But hey, you know what? We're gonna have a good time anyways. I'll carry us through this week. So hopefully we can make it through. Unfortunately, we're gonna start as always with the big news in the NFL, the injuries for this week. So we have Logan Thomas with a hamstring injury. He was part of that team that lost to me this week, and that might be part of the reason why he lost. But Logan Thomas is out at least 1 week with a hamstring injury. Joe Mixon he had a left high ankle sprain. He's week to week, so we don't know how long he's going to be out. Unfortunately, DJ Chark broke his ankles this week. He's out for the year, it seems like. And, well, good news for me, but bad news for David Montgomery. He had a left knee hyperextension, and he's out for 4 to 5 weeks. But guess who got Damian Williams? This guy. I got another running back for another 4 to 5 weeks. Woo-hoo! And that should last me until Jeff Wilson Jr. gets off of the IR and hopefully takes over the running back role in San Francisco, which should give me continuous running back continuity for the rest of the year, hopefully. Anyway, back to the sad information. Jimmy G, your boy Jimmy Garoppolo, has a calf contusion. He may or may not be playing this week. They're not telling us if he's going to play this week. So Trey Lance might be a starter for the 49ers. Unfortunately, Will Fuller, the game he gets back from his, he gets back in and then he breaks his finger, and he's out for multiple weeks. I think he just got put on the IR today. And last but not least, we have Teddy B, your boy Teddy B, with a concussion. Unfortunately, Drew Lock had to come in and play. But Teddy B is day to day. He may or may not get back out there this weekend. All right, on to a fantastic news. For this particular character, it's fantastic news. Ain't no Walla back, girl. Woo woo. Neil, you scored 171.12 fantasy points this week. Congratulations. That is a monster week. I know we were looking to get you over 200, but you didn't quite make it there. But you put up a massive game this week, and we will go more in depth once we go to that matchup. But yeah, dude, that was crazy. I mean, watching every single one of your players go off was definitely nuts. But yeah, congratulations. Your $10 will be in Venmo soon. Whether that's today or tomorrow, I will let you know when I get to it. We'll move right along here. This is going to be a quick one, boys. We're just going to fly through. I'm not talking to anybody, so I'm just going to fly through all this stuff, and we're going to get through it. It's going to be quick, concise, but hopefully entertaining. So, matchup number 1, we have Owen Tree versus Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba. Now, Owen Tree got its first victory this week with 114.36 fantasy points to Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba's 92.12. I am back. It's about time I got a win, and I am going to go on the streak of your life. It's going to be great. I am so stoked. Yes. Thank you. I've got all my players hitting hot streaks now. Hopefully we'll get Dalvin Cook back riding the horse, and I am going to have a monster team. It's going to be fantastic. My studs this week, we had your boy James Robinson, keeper extraordinaire, had 20.1 fantasy points. We had DJ Moore with 27.9 fantasy points. He is a monster. I am so stoked I got DJ Moore. Because I had Allen Robinson, I was just like, I didn't know what my wide receiver position was going to look like. But DJ Moore stepping up and being my wide receiver one, I am stoked about that. And if I had picked up, so this was so frustrating, but during the draft, I was down every single mock draft. I was able to pick up Terry McLaurin with my second pick every single draft, and it made me so frustrated that Neil picked Terry McLaurin the spot before me, and I was stuck with Allen Robinson, but he was just the next best player to draft. And I was so bummed that I didn't get Terry McLaurin. And if I had Terry McLaurin, I had DJ Moore at this point, dude, I would be like, there would be no stopping my team. It would be amazing. But unfortunately, that's not the case. You know, hindsight is 2020. But moving on to the rest of my studs this week, we had Corey Davis with 19.1 fantasy points. He put up a massive week this week on a 50-yard touchdown bomb near the end of the game. That was fantastic. I mean, he's been putting up solid numbers all year so far, except for one. I think he had one dud game, but I think he's going to be a beast from now on, now that Zach Wilson's kind of finding his rhythm, hopefully. And then my kicker, Tyler Bass, for the Buffalo Bills, 16 fantasy points. In the duds category for Owen Tree, we had Dalvin Cook with only 5.4 fantasy points. Like I said, he was coming off an injury. Hopefully we'll get him right back up on the horse and scoring those high teens, 20s, and 30s points, and my team will be a force to be reckoned with. And then unfortunately I had the Cincinnati's D, who I put too much faith in, and they only got me one fantasy point this week. On Team Chubba Hubba Double Bubba, we did have a couple of players that put up some good points. Clyde Edwards-Helaire for the second week in a row put up 18.4 fantasy points. It's the second week in a row in the studs category is what I meant by that. So he had a great time. He's starting to pick up the volume a little bit in the Chiefs offense, so that's good. He's still not getting like the goal line rushes, but he is getting goal line passes. He got, I think, a 1-yard touchdown catch this week, so he's getting some work, but still not getting those goal line rushing work. He's too small for that, so that's too bad. And then Justin Jefferson. That shouldn't be a surprise. I shouldn't say that with a surprise in my voice. But Justin Jefferson had a good game this week as well. He had 17.4 fantasy points. In the duds category, this is the first time in a couple weeks. What's that? Oh, that's a goose. We had Logan Thomas with the goose. Really, that's not his fault. He got hurt like 5 snaps into the game and didn't get a catch before then. So he had 0 fantasy points. I almost feel bad doing that, but I don't really. I apologize for nothing. And the New Orleans defense and special teams put up -3 fantasy points. Now, who did they play last week? Oh, they played the Giants, and they had a rough time. Let me tell you, the Giants, you know, they've been putting up points. They're maybe you don't want to start your defenses against the Giants. Who knows? But New Orleans D, -3 fantasy points. New Orleans in general has just been struggling this year, so we will see where that goes. You might want to switch out those defenses for next week. Just maybe an option. All right, on to matchup number 2. We have If I Don't Win, I Might Lose versus Deshaun's Happy Endings. Now, If I Don't Win, I Might Lose did take down Deshaun's Happy Endings 105.62 to 15.1 fantasy points. Now, Deshaun's happy endings. Your team looked worse than Big Ben this week. Yes, that's right. Worse than Big Ben. And do you know how bad Big Ben has been? Bad. They're calling for Dwayne Haskins to replace Big Ben. That should tell you all you need to know. All you need to know. Anyways, your team sucks, Chad. Get it together. I want a competitive league here. Get your shit together. So team, if I don't win, I might lose. We got the studs on that team. As always, Patrick Mahomes putting up big numbers. He had 31.72 fantasy points this week. Who did they play against? They played against Philadelphia. Not a very intimidating defense. And so he had a fantastic week. I'm getting texts out the wazoo. Holy cats. I apologize, guys. I got to take these. Oh, yes. My dad and my brother freaking out about Stephon Gilmore going to Carolina. That's big. That's going to help their defense. Carolina's defense is already good. Stephon Gilmore going there is going to make their defense even better. If I don't win, I might lose. Also had Najee Harris with 18.1 fantasy points. He's been consistent. Like, he's been putting up a lot of points because he's just gotten a lot of opportunities. What just happened? Yeah, he's gotten a lot of opportunities this year. Let's see. He had 15 carries for 62 yards. He also had a touchdown, and he had 6 catches for 29 yards. He's got a lot of receptions this year. I mean, including his 19 target game last week. But then this week he had six receptions. So things are going pretty well for him. He's definitely staying valuable in fantasy football. In the duds category, we have Tyler Lockett with 4.4 fantasy points and Marvin Jones Jr. with 3.9. Now, Tyler Lockett has always kind of been boom bust. A lot of people were hoping that he wouldn't be as boom bust this year, that he would be more consistent than he had previously been. But it's looking like he's not. Like, he had 2 big games, and I'm glad I tried to trade for him, and I'm glad I didn't get him after the second game, because this is just Tyler Lockett, and I shouldn't have fallen under the spell that he might just be good all year. And then Marvin Jones is just a product of Laviska Shenault going off, I think. And Laviska Shenault and James Robinson were the 2 Jacksonville Jaguars that actually had good weeks this week. And you can't really expect more than 2 Jacksonville Jaguars to have a good fantasy week at any one time. So you might just have to expect that going forward. Chenault's going to get a lot more work with DJ Chark out. You'd think Marvin Jones, I mean, he might have a good game here and there because DJ Chark is out. There's only really 3 targets now: James Robinson, Marvin Jones, and Shenault in Jacksonville. So maybe he will be better going forward as long as they game plan for it. So Deshaun's happy endings. We had 1 stud for Deshaun's happy endings this week. Well, like I said, he had a terrible week. So Saquon Barkley put up almost a third of your fantasy points. He had 27.1 fantasy points. And the rest of your team, there were just so many single-digit games. So we had Chris Carson with 3.6, CeeDee Lamb with 2.3, Cooper Kupp with 8.9, Kyle Pitts with 7, DeAndre Swift with 6.9. It was a rough week for your team. We know your team is capable of putting up big numbers, but this was just not your week. So you'll probably bounce back, but, bad week this week. Looked worse than Big Ben. Matchup number 3, we have Rock the Hawk versus my tight end Ertzwin Eifert. We have Rock the Hawk eked this out. I mean, this was a close one. They only won by 7 fantasy points. It was 122.64 to 115.48 fantasy points. Rock the Hawk took down my tight end Ertz. The studs category, before he limped off the field with a hyperextended knee, David Montgomery had 22.6 fantasy points. So good work for him. But now I got Damian Williams. I'm getting all that work for the next 4 to 5 weeks, and I am stoked. We have Buffalo's defense, who put up 21 fantasy points. Who did they play this week? Jesus, that's a massive game. They played Houston. They won 40-0. So, Houston had been putting up good numbers, but the Bills' defense is just one of those defenses. They're fantastic. In the duds category for Rock the Hawk, Mike Williams. He's useless. So once again, he had 3 good weeks to start off the year. We can't buy into that BS coming from Mike Williams. He only had 1.6 fantasy points. The studs in my tight end Ertzwin Eifert, we have Jalen Hurts, who put up 28.18 fantasy points. He's always fantasy relevant with his running legs going all over the place. And then he also had Tyreek Hill, who put up 42.1 fantasy. He put up 42 fantasy points, and you couldn't pull out this win. I don't know. Tyreek Hill had 186 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he was targeted 100 times. Let's see. He had how many catches? 11 catches, but I think he had 16 targets or something crazy like that. So, you need to figure out your team. You had Nyheim Hines with 0.1 points, so close to a goose. Travis Kelce with 4.3 points. And Denver's DST. Now I'm hearing some more Gieslings. But, yeah, just the fact that you lost with Tyreek Hill on your team, who scored 42 fantasy points. It's just sad. Yeah, the audience is gonna boo you too. It was terrible, Aaron. Terrible. Get your shit together. On to matchup number 4. We got Ain't No Waller Back Girl versus Hot Diggity Dog. Now, as we mentioned at the top of this show, Ain't No Waller Back Girl scored 171.12 fantasy points. That is a monstrous week. That is insane numbers. And then Hot Diggity Dog put up 124.32, which isn't bad in its own right. But Ain't No Waller Back Girl in the studs category is literally everybody from your team. Let's see. We had Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was a decent game. He put up 24.12 fantasy points. Jonathan Taylor put up basically 19 fantasy points. Derrick Henry with 25. Terry McLaurin with 27. Deebo Samuel with 31. It's just massive weeks. And then even your duds, Jason Sanders, your kicker, put up a measly 5. And Darren Waller and Amari Cooper scored 13 and 14 respectively. Those were your lowest scorers. That's insane. That is just crazy. I wish I had a week like that. And we'll see. Maybe I could eventually, but that was a massive week. On Team Hot Diggity Dog, you had some great games. You had Dak Prescott putting up 27 fantasy points. Austin Eckler with 28 fantasy points. He's been a beast. Zeke with 20 fantasy points. And then you had a couple of players that didn't do as great. Keenan Allen put up 7. TJ Hawkinson 6. He's still warming up on your bench here. Not on your bench, but he's still warming up. And then Daniel Carlson put up 1 fantasy point, so that's a major dud. But, there's not much you can do when your opponent scores 170 fantasy points in the week. You're basically screwed. In matchup number 5, we have Team IR, sticking true to its name, versus Waddle Baby, Waddle Baby, Waddle Baby, Waddle. Now, Team Waddle Baby scored 109.62 fantasy points to Team IR's 95.56 fantasy points. Now, this matchup wasn't really close. We had Waddle Baby. They had a couple of, mainly just one stud. Kyler Murray put up 22.62 fantasy points. Everybody else was just kind of above average, in the low teens, Kareem Hunt with 15, Noah Fant 13, Joe Mixon 13, Antonio Gibson 14. No real bad games except for the kicker. Brandon McManus only put up 1 fantasy point. So you got to be pretty happy with that score, even though it wasn't a super high scoring week for you. It was still nice fantasy scoring week. For Team IR, really living up to your name, you got so many hurt players on your team. Michael Thomas, A.J. Brown, Raheem Mostert, Jarvis Landry. Man, like we said, self-fulfilling prophecy. Josh Jacobs was in the game, but he was hurt. And just like no great games and no bad games for Team IR. You had Russell Wilson scoring 22.56 fantasy points, so that's pretty good. Everybody else was like in the high single digits, low double digits, so like 11, 13, 11, 9. Like, so not terrible, but just not great games from anybody really. So it was just kind of a meh. Do you have any yeah, sure. It was just kind of a meh game for Team IR. So that's just sometimes how it works. You know, when you draft, I'm guilty of this all the time. Drafting a safe team, like I'm always about the safe players. I rarely go for those like big boom players because I'm scared of the big, like the high ceilings, but I'm scared of the low floors. So I usually go for the high floor, low ceiling guys because I know that they're safe, and that's why I've been putting up like just over 100 points each week, is because, you know, that's kind of what I've been getting from my team. So I understand the struggles, but all right, boys, it's time for our favorite section of the week, the waiver wire team that would kick all of our asses. Now, this week we have Sam Darnold at the quarterback position. He put up 31.54 fantasy points, and he has the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL right now. More than all running backs, more than all quarterbacks. Sam Darnold has 5 rushing touchdowns and 5 passing touchdowns. It's insane. It's madness. Sam Darnold is lifted from under the thumb of Adam Gase, and he is just flying. We have in the running back 1 position, we have Kenneth Gainwell with 17.9 fantasy points. Running back 2 on this waiver wire team had Alex Collins with 14.8 fantasy points. Wide receiver 1, your boy Randall Cobb, coming back from the grave. He had 21.4 fantasy points. Wide receiver 2 was Khalif Raymond with 18.1 fantasy points. At the tight end spot, we have CJ Uzama with 24 fantasy points. In the flex, we got Van Jefferson from LA Rams, 18 fantasy points. There are multiple defenses that scored 9 points this week. We had the Packers, the Bears, and the Chargers. And then at the kicker position, we have Matt Prater and Jake Elliott, who both put up 15 fantasy points. Now that team would total you, drum roll please. Oh, that's what I need. I need a drum roll. 169.74 fantasy points. You know what that means? Neil, you beat the waiver wire. That only happened, I think, once or twice last year. That's insane. Like, your team put up the best team that the waiver wire could muster. So, congratulations. You deserve it. The waivers are 3-1 for this year. So they have lost a matchup. Now, matchup predictions. I'm hoping to at least get some matchup predictions from Courts so I can let you guys know who he predicts for next year, or for next week, I should say. But last week, both Adam and I picked the same teams, so we were both 4 for 5. So we're getting even better. Last week, the previous week, I was 3 for 5. So we're getting even better. This time, I'm gonna pick all of them right. But unfortunately for me, you guys are 1-0-2. I've tied you guys twice this year. So we are moving on to the matchup predictions for next week. Let's take a look at these matchups. Maybe if my computer will load. Why is this not showing next week's matchups? Okay. Give me 1 second. Alright, I'll just pull it up on my phone. My computer doesn't like me right now, so I'll pull it up on my phone. Alright, matchups for next week. We got Owen Tree, matchup number 1. Owen Tree versus if I don't win, I might lose. Now, to start off with, I'm projected, I think this is my highest projection of the year. But, as we know, projections don't mean shit. So, I'm projected at 122.6 fantasy points over if I don't win, I might loses 110.3 fantasy points. I got Tom Brady versus Miami. I'm loving that matchup. James Robinson versus a weak Tennessee defense this year. Dalvin Cook versus Detroit. DJ Moore versus Philadelphia. Another one. Great matchup for DJ Moore. Corey Davis versus Atlanta. Another great matchup for wide receivers. George Kittle versus Arizona. That might be a little bit more difficult, but Arizona has been not great against the tight end. Damian Williams versus Las Vegas. That's a great matchup. And then I grabbed the New England defense against that terrible Houston offense. And then Tyler Bass, Buffalo versus Kansas City. Dude, every single one of my matchups is great this week. I think my team is going to boom. My team is going to be fantastic this week. So I am definitely picking my team. Just for reference, James's team, Pat Mahomes is going against Buffalo. That should be a good game to watch. Kansas City, Buffalo, that's a game to watch. We got Aaron Jones versus Cincinnati. He'll probably have a good game. Najee Harris against a tough Denver defense. Chris Godwin versus Miami, so he'll offset some of my Tom Brady points. Tyler Lockett versus the Rams. Dallas Goedert versus Carolina. That's going to be tough. Marvin Jones versus Tennessee. That should be a good matchup. Tampa Bay versus Miami. That should be good. And then Young Hui Koo versus the New York Jets. So that should be good for a kicker. But I'm picking me to win this matchup. Owen Tree, lock it in. Matchup number 2, we got Hot Digsity Dog versus my tight end Ertzwin Eifert. Classic Adam versus Aaron matchup. Let's see what we got here. First off, Hot Digsity Dog is projected to get 118 fantasy points to my tight end Ertz's 111 fantasy points. We got Dak versus the Giants. Eckler versus Cleveland. That's going to be tough. Zeke versus the Giants. That Dak-Zeke stack. Rare, but potentially good maybe. We got Stephon Diggs versus Kansas City. Like we said, that's going to be a good game. Keenan Allen versus Cleveland. That's going to be tough. TJ Hawkinson versus Minnesota. That'll be a good matchup. And Antonio Brown versus Miami. That'll be a good matchup. So Hot Dixie Dog has some pretty good matchups this week, but a couple of bad ones. We got my tight end Ertz. We got Jalen Hurts versus Carolina. And Miles Sanders versus Carolina. That's an even rarer stack, the Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders stack. Now, I am terrified of Miles Sanders. I am terrified of Nyheim Hines. Both of them have not producing in their blood over the last couple weeks. We got DK Metcalf against the Rams, Tyreek Hill against Buffalo, Travis Kelce against Buffalo, and Adam Thielen versus Detroit. I think that the running backs are too weak in this matchup for my tight end Ertz. So I am predicting Hot Digsity Dog to win this matchup. Lock it in. We got matchup number 3, Waddle Baby Waddle Baby Waddle Baby Waddle versus Deshaun's Happy Endings. We got Kyler Murray. The projections. Deshaun's Happy Endings are actually projected to get 117.9 fantasy points versus Waddle Baby's 111.3 fantasy points. So we'll start with Deshaun's Happy Endings. We'll look at Matt Stafford versus Seattle. That should be good. Matt Stafford, Cooper Kupp stacked versus Seattle. That's going to be great. That's going to be another good game, that Rams-Seattle game. That should be really good. We got Saquon Barkley versus Dallas. Dallas's defense has been better this year. Chris Carson versus the Rams. Now, we don't know if Chris Carson's even going to play this week. So he's got DeAndre Swift, and then he can put in Devonta Smith in his flex if he wanted to, or Jacoby Myers. That might be a good play. He's got CeeDee Lamb versus the Giants. And Kyle Pitts versus the Jets. That should be good. DeAndre Swift versus Minnesota should be a good matchup. He's got some pretty good matchups. He's going to have to figure out his running back 2 spot. Like we said, Swift up there wouldn't be a bad call. And then, Devonta Smith against Carolina. That might be a little bit tougher matchup, but Devonta Smith has been producing, so... And then we got Kyler Murray on the Waddle Babies side. We got Kyler Murray versus San Francisco, Antonio Gibson versus New Orleans, who hasn't looked as good recently. Samaje Perine versus Green Bay, good pickup. Devontae Adams on the other side of the ball for that matchup versus Cincinnati. Jamar Chase versus Green Bay. Man, you got a lot a lot of players in this Green Bay-Cincinnati game. Noah Fant versus Pitt. That should be good. Kareem Hunt versus the Chargers. You got to figure out your defense, maybe. I don't know if I would play Pittsburgh versus Denver. And then Matt Prater versus San Francisco. Of course, that's totally up to you if you want to play Pittsburgh versus Denver. Oh, they do have Drew Lock, so maybe that will be a good... And they're probably better because they have TJ Watt back. So you might be in a good spot. Yeah, your running backs look good. Your wide receivers look good. You know, I did have... Deshaun's happy endings written in the show doc, but I think now that I'm looking at the matchups, especially if you throw in, actually, I would almost throw in Cordell Patterson over Pirine, maybe, or maybe Hunt. I don't know. Cordell Patterson has been a monster, and I don't know if this is a matchup where they're going to be ahead against the Jets and maybe they don't need Cordell Patterson as much, but I would play him if I've got him, at least until the juice runs out. Yeah, I think I'm going to pick Waddle Baby to win this matchup, so lock that in. I'm switching it live, so you guys are seeing it. I'm switching it live. On to matchup number 4. We got Team IR versus Rock the Hawk. So on Rock the Hawk is projected to get 100 fantasy points, and Team IR is actually projected to win with 104 fantasy points. We've got Lamar Jackson on Rock the Hawk. We've got Lamar Jackson versus Indianapolis. We've got Alvin Kamara versus Washington. That should be a decent matchup. We've got David Montgomery, which you're going to have to figure out, versus Las Vegas. You don't have David Montgomery anymore, but Leonard Fournette against Miami is a great option to put in your running back too. And then you got Mike Evans that you're sitting for some reason, or Deontay Johnson, either one of them to play, or Melvin Gordon even. We'll see. I mean, you got plenty of options on your bench here to throw in your flex. You got DeAndre Hopkins against San Francisco, Mike Williams versus Cleveland. That might be tough. It might be another dud from Mike Williams again this week. We got Jared Cook versus Cleveland as well. So a lot riding against that Cleveland game. You know what? Team IR, let's go through their matchups here. They got Russell Wilson against the Rams. We got Nick Chubb versus the Chargers. We got Josh Jacobs versus Chicago. That's going to be a tough game for Josh Jacobs. Calvin Ridley versus the Jets. Hunter Renfrow versus Chicago. Mark Andrews versus Indianapolis, and Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams versus Minnesota. This is tough. I mean, A.J. Brown, I think, practiced today, so he might play this week. I would probably put him in instead of Hunter Renfrow if you get him back. That's against Jacksonville, so that should be a good game for him. This is tough. I have written in here Team IR, and I think I believe it because Rock the Hawk has more difficult matchups, and they got to figure out the David Montgomery situation. So I think it's really tough to pick Team IR to win, but I'm going to pick Team IR. I'm locking it in. Team IR is getting the W this week. On to matchup number 5. We got Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba versus Ain't No Waller Back Girl. Woo woo. So we got Ain't No Waller Batgirl is projected with 120 fantasy points versus Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba's 104. On Ain't No Waller Batgirl, we got Aaron Rodgers versus Cincinnati, Jonathan Taylor versus Baltimore. That's going to be a tough matchup. Derrick Henry versus Jacksonville. He should just steamroll Jacksonville. Terry McLaurin versus New Orleans, which isn't as tough of a matchup as we may think. And then we got Amari Cooper versus the Giants. We got Darren Waller versus Chicago, and Deebo Samuel, who's been a beast against Arizona. That's pretty good. And then Baltimore's D versus Indianapolis and Jason Sanders. On Chubba Hubba Dubba Bubba, we got Josh Allen going against Kansas City. Like I said, that's going to be a high-scoring game. I think he's going to put up a big week. Darrell Henderson, he's been good so far. He's going against Seattle. That should be a good matchup. Chuba Hubbard versus Philadelphia. That's not as scary of a matchup, I don't think, as it has been in the past with the running game. So he should be okay. Justin Jefferson versus Detroit. We got Robert Woods versus Seattle. I think he's going to have a comeback starting this week. I think he's going to be good. It's going to be a high-scoring game, I think, against Seattle. So Tyler Higbee also versus Seattle. We got Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Buffalo. That might be tough. Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus Buffalo might be a bad matchup. But you don't really have any... I guess you could go with, like... I don't know. It's difficult to suggest this, but like Darnell Mooney versus Las Vegas over Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the flex this week. We'll see, but unfortunately, Courts, I'm going to have to go with team Ain't No Waller Back Girl. Lock that in. All right, boys. I told you it was going to be a quick one. It's going to be a good one. I hope you guys enjoyed. I made it through by myself. Like I said, hopefully we get Courts on sometime soon. Hopefully, unfortunately we don't have a mail time this week, so I can't do the mail time drop, even though it's my favorite drop of all time, mainly because I made it myself. But yeah, boys, I made it quick tonight. I hope you guys had a wonderful time. I hope you enjoyed just me. I know it's not as entertaining, but I tried to make it as entertaining as possible. Try to bring the energy, and I hope you guys felt it. But anyway, I'm going to be back next week with another win under my belt. I'm going to be 2-3 and well on my way to the playoffs. So you guys, good luck this week. I hope you guys have fun. Have a good weekend. And I am going to catch you Gooshbagz later. Enjoy your week, guys. Goodbye.